familia. This is Trey Collazo. You're watching and listening to the Found in Translation Talk Show. The talk show that stacks truth about politics and today's hottest issues. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for joining us for a special mini race sound-off edition of Found in Translation. We do the full show, as we will do this week, Thursday evening, where I'll be joined again by my co-host, Zulay Picarelli, and other special guests. The focus of the show on Thursday is going to be on New York. And it's going to be our friends in New York and New York metropolitan area, our first responders, and others, whether they're in the health system, essential workers on the front lines, helping us, serving us in so many ways, and the people being impacted. How do we support the people being impacted in a hot zone, in a place that's really ground zero for this crisis like New York City? We're also going to have Reverend Adan Marena, a local a local minister in Philadelphia, one of my spiritual advisors, who's going to come out. It's Holy Week, y'all. Easter's around the corner. Our Lord and Savior for many of us in our Catholic and Christian faith traditions is going to die for our sins this weekend, or we're going to celebrate that incredible moment in history. So I want to talk a little bit about what that means and what this moment in history means right now. There's Jose Collazo. Thank you for joining the Found Translation Talk Show. If you're watching and listening on Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube, or as an audio show, anywhere you can download a podcast, and also as a radio program at WPPMLP 106.5 in Philadelphia. For our folks watching, please share this with your friends. Even if they catch it tomorrow morning, that's fine. But I got a few things I got to say. And I hope the channel and be a vessel for some of the things you're thinking about and the emotions you're going through right now. First of all, this episode dedicated, and really the show moving forward, ultimately is going to be dedicated to those we're losing and we have lost, and those who are suffering right now on ventilators or in silence at their homes because they don't have access or they're not sick enough to be seen by in an emergency room where they reside, or they don't have the hookup to be seen or get a test, or people that are on the front lines paranoid that they have been in contact with someone in quarantine. But ultimately, for those we have lost, and we've lost already way too many, over 16,000, I believe was the count that I heard before I came on air just now, including an incredible disproportionate amount of people that are impacting our personal network in the New York metropolitan area and really throughout the northern East Coast, including down into Philadelphia. And one name I just wanted to mention, one of numerous, is someone that one of his sons just announced. We lost him just a little while ago on social media. I feel comfortable sharing because he's been very public. Sid has been very public about it on social media the last few hours. The pioneering Dominican American doctor, Dr. Jaime Wilson, has been lost. Jaime is known, first of all, amongst my friend group as Sid Wilson's dad. And that's a very special title that I know he carried with a great set of pride. Sid, one of the great leaders we have in our country. And in particular, for the Dominican American community, really the New York Latino community, a pioneering doctor, one of the first Dominican doctors in Washington Heights, who serviced the Dominican Latino community in New York for, decades upon decades. A wonderful man, a great family man. He's widowed. He leaves us with his wife as well. And Sid, his siblings, and a large family and a wonderful network. So, Descansa en paz, Dr. Jaime Wilson, and the others we have lost. And unfortunately, we're going to lose because of this corona crisis. So I just have a few thoughts that I wanted to share in that context, because I guess we're all going through different emotions. And obviously, the most important thing is our personal health, whether it's physical health and making sure we distance ourselves from this crisis, literally. Our mental health, which we're going to touch on in Thursday's show. And just our spirits and feeling like, I know many of our activist friends are wondering, how do we balance being really upset about this whole situation? What do we do about it? To right now, we got to hunker down and survive. And unfortunately, those are not mutually exclusive emotions. And we have to embrace all of our emotions in the context of making sure we take care of ourselves first. Because like I said, don't listen to anybody a lot. Don't listen. Take care of yourselves. That's the most important thing. So just really quickly, we're in a pretty unprecedented downward spiral as a country, my friends. from a health perspective, they're talking about we conservatively lose a couple 100,000 people. And that number, first of all, we don't really know because our federal government has done an incredibly poor job. You want to debate D or F minus throughout the last several months, ignoring the problem, thinking it would go away because, that would be bad politics. It became a problem. It'll get warm in the spring and it'll just go away. I mean, he literally said that. Late February said it was a hoax when there's tons of evidence that his own federal government, which is sort of bare bones as it is, gave him ample warning. And just this failure of leadership, on and on and on, not taking responsibility, putting it off on states, to the point now where you just had to put $2 trillion on the credit card, not his credit card, on our credit card, our grandkids' credit card. And they're already asking, the Republicans, who are supposed to be the fiscal conservative ones, already asking for $200 billion more. A health crisis that will be with us probably for at least another year. That will lead to an economic crisis that we don't know where this will lead. How many of these small businesses will ever come back? And what can we do to help those small businesses? How many of these nonprofit organizations, these charitable organizations to help the poorest people in our society and just help people across the board will be back, will ever be back? The ramifications of this, the social fabric of our country, it's hard to even try to quantify right now and fathom. Felix Montalado watching in. Good to see you, Felix. I'm going to get into something in a second. I think you're going to enjoy the spirit of it. It is Holy Week, my friend. So we got to get grounded in our faith. If that's your faith tradition. If it's not, we're down with everybody's faith tradition, even those that don't have a faith tradition. We're here for everybody. We just want everyone to be safe. We don't want to lose anybody else. And in the midst of all this, we have, which long-term could be the biggest problem, which is the erosion of our democracy. And if you don't believe me, see what happened in Wisconsin today. There's no reason to have that election today. There's nothing pressing. You could delay it a few months. I'm not saying cancel it because that would be undemocratic. But you cancel it. You could delay. You could delay it. You could give us some time to get vote by mail ballots out to people within a reasonable period. And you could have a more legitimate, safer election. But no. Republican legislators and ultimately the Republicans on the Wisconsin State Supreme Court, and even with an assist from the Republican appointed justices on the U.S. Supreme Court, empowered this erosion of our democracy, empowered actually putting tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of Wisconsinites in health danger by giving them this false choice, this horrible choice, either to be barred essentially from participating in an election in the United States of America, or risking your life to go vote. It's incredible. Isn't what the civil rights movement boiled down to? And why we look to that fight, that righteous fight, as one of the great organizing movements and really a game-changing moment for our country. It turns out we're in the midst of all of this. We're dealing with those same issues. And of course, our president has been just beginning to drumbeat in these, Carnival Barker press conferences to say, oh, no, I don't like any kind of vote by mail. I don't like any absentee balloting, even though he just did it himself for the Florida primary. I want everybody to vote. I want them to have an ID. They got to show up in person because there's fraud in the vote by mail system. Of course, the U.S. mail service is run by the federal government. And there's no evidence. The only evidence of a coordinated vote by mail suppression has happened in recent history, or even in semi-recent history, was implemented by Republicans in North Carolina a few years ago. So we have a crisis that, I'm not saying would have totally been avoided. There would have been people that would have been hurt. Got to, brother. My man Frank got the best Latino sushi place in the country. No question about it. Who needs LA, Vegas, Phoenix? Where you got my man Frank's spot, La Sushi. Appreciate you, my man. And in the midst of all this, he fires the guy. They just passed the bill for this bailout, right? This $2 trillion. He fires the guy that's going to oversee it to make sure that nothing wrong happens with the money they're going to give to the businesses. They haven't even started working. But the guy actually was just impartial. That was his sin. He actually just wanted to do a fair job. His job was to make sure the money is used correctly. He's already been fired. Then, of course, the IG who literally just submitted a report to Congress, which was his job, what he's supposed to do, gets fired Friday night by the coward in the White House. So from a electoral perspective, from a checks and balances perspective, our democracy is as much under attack as we are, who are now imprisoned in our own homes because of this incompetence. And so I think about how we got here. And I also think about Holy Week. It's a very special time for so many of us, of course, also for our Jewish brothers and sisters. I believe Passover started today. So happy Passover to our Judaic friends as well. But I think about this time in my life, people don't know, you know me, but people don't know me that as well as my North Philly heads. I was the quintessential Catholic school little Latino boy. I went to Catholic school from kindergarten to 12th grade of my life. I went to an all-boys Catholic school. And my school, St. Veronica's, from kindergarten to 8th grade was the quintessential neighborhoods changing from white ethnic, Italian, Irish to Hispanic. So within 3 years, my kindergarten went from, by the time I got to kindergarten, it was all pretty much Latinos. But, I have older cousins that they're only 3-4 years older than me, that still went to school with white kids. So, just sort of that gentrification, not gentrification, but just that kind of white flight in real time. Growing up, I went to church pretty much every day because you went to church every day for school. And so, look, I may not be the most Catholic person in my life at this point. I probably consider myself more spiritual. I'm very spiritual. I'm a mediocre Catholic. But the one thing I can say about that time in my life and my Catholic faith, which I still value very much so, is I listened. And I'll say this, that the one thing, thinking about the movie, The 10 Commandments, which y'all are going to be watching, Charlton Heston. You're going to be watching it, all my good Catholic people. I know Patricia Guadalupe was joking about it. That's the big tradition. And we all sit around watching 10 Commandments in the movie. And, all these great old Hollywood stars are in the movie and the 10 Commandments and how significant it is to our lives. Absolutely. I'm going to read something here. I'm going to read the first commandment for y'all. I think it's quite insightful where we're at right now. The first commandment, not the seventh, not the third, the first commandment. Mi gente, if you open up your dusty Bibles, thou shalt have no other gods before me. No other. Ninguno más. So what has happened? You literally have people, whether it's elected officials, pastors in certain congregations, media figures, your local cousin that believes everything he sees on Facebook that he thinks is right, would rather put us in danger, would rather put ourselves in danger at times, would rather put your children in danger, as Jerry Falwell Jr. did, by shamefully reopening up Liberty University in Virginia. Yo tengo primo que went to that school. would put our family members, our loved ones, their own loved ones, themselves in danger. I would argue for following another God. Not the gods that gave us the gifts, la capacidad, to develop science, to develop medical research, to have the blessings, and God love our first responders, our doctors, our nurses, the medical professionals who are saving lives as we speak and putting themselves on the line, using the gifts God gave them, the hands, the intelligence, the ethical. You know, we have people putting themselves on the line and making $12 an hour because you know what? I saw some on TV just now. You know, I have to go to my work at the supermarket because los viejitos, the elderly, they need help putting the bags together. People need my gift. And God bless them for that. They're listening to the God whose first commandment was, thou shalt have no other God before me. And look, President Trump wasn't the beginning of this. There is a group of people in this country, and I'm not saying everything they say is wrong, but the reality is there was a generation of people, starting with the conservative media, then enough buy-in by certain sectors of corporate America, certain church leaders, faith leaders, and ultimately Republican leadership who's beholden to all these people, who festered this idolatry, this culture that isn't about traditional conservative values when it comes to economic principles or, foreign policy principles. It's none of that. It's none of that. Look at the money they're all spending. They're throwing money out the window. They can't get it out of our coffers fast enough. $2 trillion. They just asked for $200 trillion more today. So it's not about that. It's about creating an ethos that promotes a profile that makes people comforted. And actually, I suggest, not to be harsh, but I think takes it that plays off people's genuine care for their spirituality and their religiosity at times. And so they've directed people that, by all accounts, should have their own brains, can see what's going on, but have blurred that vision to say, no, we have to follow this God, which is not the real God. Because this is a person that comforts you, that makes us feel better about ourselves. So maybe there's a little talk, but guess what? Talk of hatred, division, malicia is not going to save you. And that's what you're getting from this God that is being followed by too many people. 3 months ago, the Republicans in the Senate, those 53 of them, had an opportunity to end this, to end it. You would have still had a Republican president who's actually on some levels more conservative, ideologically more a Republican, especially on social issues. And they could have ended this madness and ended this idolatry, this cult that has infected our population. I wanted to read a parable because, again, I'm not, not a holy roller. I don't pretend to be. I certainly have my faults. I'm a sinner. But I listened when the nuns and the priests, I listened. So this is what I understand to be what the Bible is. I just want to read the summary of one quick parable. Jesus had these wonderful parables. That guy, Jesus, who many of us, majority of the country probably across the spectrum believe was, the human manifestation of God. And again, if you don't believe that, it's cool. But this is obviously a big basis of this conversation that we're talking about and the churches talk about. And that is part of the justification apparently for putting people in harm's way at mega churches in certain parts of our country, or, justifying, okay, don't listen, I know he's a horrible human being, but you have to follow him because God said to follow him. So I'm going to read with you a little of that tradition You make up your own minds. So one of my favorites of many from Jesus Christ, who was the child of refugees of color, who was not even allowed the humanity to be born in a home or a hospital. He had to be born in a manger because the people of power in his community treated his family as refugees of color, as second-class citizens. Makes you think, doesn't it, on Holy Week? The parable of the unjust judge, where a woman continually advocates for justice. Grant me justice against my adversary. And Jesus analyzes his parable after he shares it by saying, for those that cry out to God day and night, God will see that they get justice. Does that sound like a God to you that would let people in harm's way for the coronavirus? Would let people in unjust prison conditions stay in those conditions? Do you think that's a God in a Jesus? What do you think Jesus would think about the fact that we have thousands of people, including hundreds, if not thousands of children who are still separated from their families, incarcerated on our southern border for, in many cases, people who are trying to legally enter the country through a legal refugee process? We have no idea what's happening in those ICE facilities, friends. We just have no idea. What do you think Jesus would think about that? What do you think Jesus would think about by leadership that would put people in harm's way by not doing everything they possibly could to get ventilators to the communities that need them right now? Because that governor spoke up to me. That woman spoke up to me. By the way, the parable of the unjust judge was a woman who called truth to power to a judge and demanded justice. That's the story Jesus spoke to us about. And what's interesting about this parable is that he does hold us accountable, Jesus, for speaking up. Because he says, for those that cry out day and night, God will see that they get justice. He doesn't say, para que la bobo, I'll take care of you. He doesn't say, if you listen to these other false gods, I'll take care of you. He says, for those that cry out day and night, you will you will get justice from God. So we have a responsibility to listen to God, the true God, not the false God, not the God that lies to you, not the God that, and I don't care where you fall on the spectrum, doesn't care about you. Because I know the God that I follow cares, and we care. My man Elbert Garcia got something to say. Elby, what's up?
Hey, man. Ray, what's up? What's up? How you doing?
Sounding off, dog. That's what I'm doing. Got a little
man.
Brother, talk to me.
Yeah, it's I mean, you're talking about Holy Week. I was just thinking about this today. I was like, tomorrow's, our Jewish brothers and sisters start Passover.
Absolutely.
It's,
of course.
And I know you were mentioning that, and I was talking to my mom's, today, and we were talking about.
On that point, I want to shout out a couple that is very close to our heart, Sarah Katz and her husband.
That's
and
true.
Her family, David Love. Wonderful people. And Sarah, we need to get on here. But I just, thinking about some of the Mark Steyer, a local friend here in Philadelphia, many of our Jewish brothers and sisters. I know they're with us. Jesus, tonight for me was how would you say, a vessel to have the real conversation.
No doubt. And the thing is this, and look, I was talking to my mom. My mom was, giving me all the news of all the Dominicans, that have passed away. Folks like former president of the Dominican Parade, Nelson Peña, passed away.
Nelson passed as well.
Yeah.
I'd say entre los italianos dominicanos, y'all have gotten it the worst.
No. I mean, but we were talking.
And throughout the diaspora in DR and in the Northeast Corridor.
And in the Northeast Corridor. Right? I mean, look. I mean, my own zip code of 10032, one of the highest, COVID-19 infection rates and death rates. Right.
I want to shout out, and I'm for full disclosure, I'm trying to see if we can squeeze a few minutes worth on the show.
Yeah.
State Assemblywoman out of New York, Inés Reyes.
That's right.
Who was stepped out of her assembly role to go back into
back in nursing, right? Into the hospital.
Now you talk about a leader. You talk about someone that's following what God is calling her to do.
No. But they say, Ray, that in some ways, God sometimes doesn't provide just the answers, but He also provides the opportunity, right? And so maybe this is the opportunity for us to really see where folks really stand. Right, in terms of who they are, right, to see really where their hearts are, and more importantly, to see where their leadership is, right, and really the real question is not so much to see, because there's signs all around us, right. Our leaders are always telling us signs. There's a lot of racist folks in power, a lot of folks who maybe aren't racist, but who just don't really give the damn that we need them to give. Right, not that they don't give a damn, but it's the damn that we need them to give. So maybe this is their opportunity to either step up or step out the way. Right. And for some folks to do that.
Yeah, no. And it's not only that. And it's also, look, and I struggle with it at times, because I get, obviously part of this is that people like you and I follow this stuff. And the more you know, the more you get infuriated. Right. But look, people do have a right to not focus on this stuff in their daily lives. Honestly, I respect the fact it's not my thing. I just want to live my life. And you sort of casually go in and out of it. And then you kind of feel like on some level, because of your personal profile, you're supposed to be on a team. Because you're white, or you're from a certain background, or you culturally you're Republicans, or you're Latino and you're from a certain evangelical denomination, and every cada fin de semana the pastor tells you we got to save the babies. I understand that, but on some level you got to think for yourself, and that's all I'm saying. I think we have a responsibility not to be like finger pointy, because we tend to be that way as hoity-toity progressives. But le mismo bet, you got to meet us halfway. You got to wake up. Because you're costing people your lives. You might cost yourself your life to stay in this fog. You got to get out of the fog. God don't want you in this fog. And God didn't put you in this fog.
And you got to stop digging, right? At the end of the day, you got to stop digging, right? I mean, there's a hole that's being created, and folks just got to stop digging. Like, where does it stop, right? Where does it end, right? And every day there's a little bit of something there, right? Whether you're talking about the treatment of immigrants and refugees, or you're talking about, Trump taking away, IGs, firing IGs left and right, it's at some point you've got to step and say, the line has to be drawn somewhere, right? It's like that old Picard thing from First Contact, right? Where he's like, the line has to be drawn here. Somewhere we have to draw the line, right? And I think as moral leaders, in which we hope our leaders ought to all be that way, this is a week very specifically where we have to kind of look at what's going on and figure out, look, we are where we are, right? Blaming, whatever, the real question is not who got us here, but the real question is how we're going to get out. And if you're not part of the process of helping people get out, of rebuilding lives, of rebuilding not just, people's health, but people's own psyche. I mean, especially in places like Puerto Rico, people we're living in a time of fear, and it's a fear-based economy, right? It's a fear-based economy. Anything that sells, whether it's guns or anything that's doing well, right? And we've got to shift that, right? If you're talking about it as God-fearing people, as Christians, as spiritual folks, whether your spirit is through Judeo-Christian stuff or just in terms of any other stuff, we're not supposed to be living in fear, right? Fear, we're not supposed to be having our livelihoods tied to fear, right? That certainly isn't freedom, and that certainly isn't love, right? And so I think, we really we have to step out and not be afraid of saying that's what we want, and what do we do to get that, right? And we have a right to say that our businesses, our government, our any kind of collective action that we take as human beings should not be dedicated towards feeding love, and not towards dedicated to feeding fear, right, and anxiety, but instead feeling like love and collaboration and love, not like in a very like idealistic, oh, I think you're the best kind of thing, but love being like, look, having a general spirit of energy
Well,
for the
faith
human
without works
condition.
is dead, because we could do all that praying we want, and we can do all that. Yeah, I feel bad, but you got to be, for us to get out of this hole, and this is not just a political hole or an economic hole. It's all the above, right? Health hole.
Yeah.
It's going to take all of us. And look, we're seeing a lot of goodness out there. I mean,
no, it's true.
So there's
it's
all
true.
kind of people. So I don't want this to be a downer, because there's one.
No, there's a lot of people doing a lot of good stuff.
A lot of people, not just the first responders, the charity. You know how many of our friends, I don't want to call people out, but how many of our friends have just put a note on social media like, look, no judgment. You short on some groceries, send me a note. And that's from the heart. You know what I'm saying? And I know people are doing a lot of things that we don't see, and it's even about, I had someone reach out to me and say, oh, would it be okay if I call so-and-so? Because it seems like they're going through it. I don't really know them. It's like, there's a lot of goodness around us, man. And I think that's what's helping us keep saying. Albert, how are you? I'm curious with my goddaughter, Nadia. I almost feel like the children on some level are handling it better than the adults. But I'm sure she's helping you as much as you're helping her. But, how do we, your thoughts around that dynamic is this? Because they are starting to figure out there's something up,
No, I think they are. And I think, look, sometimes they're a pain in the ass. I mean, like around the house. I mean, right?
Well, at least I got the advantage because I got two, so they got two boys close. So they have each other to play with. That's a big help.
But I'm saying but they're no more. Look, man, they no more pain than kids were and we were when we were that age too, right? I mean, you take anybody, in terms of that kind of environment, they're in better shape in that way. There, I mean, I think kids are having questions, right? And kids are trying to feel safe. And I think as parents, I think what's hard is that you are trying. Look, man, you always try to keep your kids safe, right? I mean, you always try to keep your kids from feeling like giving them hope and faith and look, I mean, they worry about the little things, right? I mean, she's got her birthday next week, she's wondering like what's going to happen, but then she saw
when you're that age, that's like a big deal.
But then she saw this past weekend, there was a friend of hers who had invited her to a virtual birthday party, right? So she had fun and then they worked it out, right? And so I think it's like, I think for us as parents is remembering like these are about the moments, right? And we're supposed to have the overview and remember it. In some ways, look, I mean, just being able to do something to recreate some sort of sense of normalcy for these kids, that's what we do, right? And that's what we try to do. And look, I'm blessed, right? Like, and look, we're not in the Northeast, right? We're in Miami. So there's a little bit, when I say a little bit of
we all at least being able to. Y'all gonna get it pretty soon. It's right on the cusp of it being a big.
No, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that we got to worry about too, right? I mean, first of all, the thing about, look, I already said, I mean, people were been social distancing along race and class in Miami for years and decades even before this, right? So I don't, like, this isn't anything easier, and this is about a state that has a $275 like unemployment for 13 weeks as a standard practice. I mean, there's a lot of messed up stuff. And a lot of things that doesn't allow this state to deal with it.
I want to quickly put a point on what you just said there. So what LB's referring to is the fact that now that we have this massive group of people that are applying for unemployment, and unemployment gets administered on a state level, many things have gotten exposed as related to now Senator, then Governor Scott treatment of the unemployment system.
Oh, man.
Bankrupted it to the point where it's one of the lowest unemployment rates in the country in terms of what you get.
He cut it, right? This is the thing. He came in 2011. He cut it from 26 weeks to 13 weeks, right? So not only has it now raised for inflation, but he also cut the amount, right? And in fact, when you think about it, the great thing about this CARES Act is that the CARES Act knocks in $600 extra a week, right, for an extended period amount of time. I think it's like potentially up to like 39 weeks, right? Which is almost 3 times in which state did it. And he had the audacity to try to speak out against it because he was trying to cap it at 600 as opposed to giving an additional 600.
And he didn't even understand the basic theory.
No. He understood the theory. I don't get pissed off at it, and I'll call him out at it because his point and a bunch of other folks who can't remember the last time that they didn't have a job, right? Didn't
himself.
Right. I mean, they talked about, well, we're afraid that if folks got this money, that they wouldn't want to go back to work, that they would try to live off the public dole, right? And it's like, you know what? If that's what you're thinking at this time, right, then especially like, you know, like you almost want to say like, God so help you that you have to face this thing, this issue up front, right? Because to tell people like that, I mean, folks, I mean, you got farm workers going into the fields to provide, you know, folks, you know, food and the grocery.
Essential workers.
You got folks going on like, you know, heading into Publix to like, you know, to freaking provide food and even a sense of normalcy to people. And you're going to tell those people who perhaps who are going to probably lose their jobs at some point that, oh, like that they don't want to get back to work, right? Because you're trying to make sure they don't lose their jobs or they don't lose their houses or they don't lose their health care.
And then the last part of that is that he purposely created a very bad unemployment system. So it's clunky, it's always breaking, people can't get through it. Now people are struggling, even if they got laid off, even when the federal money passes money, it's close to impossible to access it through state government in Florida.
Right. And again, this is where I think in some ways the Republican philosophy of trying to, almost trying to like strip resources away from government, right, in an effort to make it smaller, right, is really coming back to bite them, or at least potentially bite them, because again, the only way it's going to come and bite them is if people hold them accountable, right? And the real question will be, of course, is that like, you know, if you're in the middle of a pandemic, you know, as we see in Wisconsin, is the system going to be able to actually, you know, allow you to flex your muscles politically, or are they going to find a way to use to use this, the incompetency of government in which they've actually created to actually to keep themselves in power, right, and keep us from the power that we should have.
People that are so hard working down in Florida, because you have to work extra hard because the wages are low because of labor laws, are struggling to just get their unemployment through no fault of their own. And these stinking cruise line
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. You're listening to my compadre, Elbert Garcia, on Found Translation. We're sounding off. The last piece, Elby, real quick, I wanted you to touch on is today, actually, in the national conversation, began the conversation around, oh, wow, it turns out black folks are dying of corona disproportionately. So what's your hope? I guess what's your Holy Week wish or prayer that we get out of that conversation? Because, you know, Trump gave us some lip service today. But at the end of the day, what this pandemic is doing is exposing the cracks, these huge potholes in our system around inequities. We don't just impact people of color. Because let me tell you something, poor white folks are going to get this. Y'all going to get sick real soon in these suburban areas. It's just a matter of time, these rural areas. But the disproportionate, particularly these inequities impact the black community around health issues and black women around health issues. I mean, they are getting shined a light that they haven't been shined on for quite some time, and we keep hollering about it, and now it's in everybody's face.
Well, I mean, I think part of it is that, I mean, you've got some great, I think, nonprofits and I think foundations who have been for a long time, really ever since ever since Obamacare, even before Obamacare, we're talking about health disparities, and specifically health disparities in the African American community and low income folks. I mean, there are folks who've been working hard on that, and everyone knows that it's a kind of a ticking time bomb, right, in terms of what's going on, right? Because what everyone also fails to remember is that even with COVID, what's going to go on is that if all the hospitals are dealing with that, then the regular issues that folks have are also not being met again, right? And so that's going to add upon to that. So, you know, I think earlier this week, you had a bunch of civil rights organizations, you know, actually, encourage or try to kind of force the government to also try to, release in terms of some of the racial data that they might have. We're starting to see, you know, those local journalists who still have jobs, right? Because you have a bunch of local papers that are really struggling in terms of trying to keep reporters, employed, right? But you have folks looking in terms of the data there. And so I think, this healthcare thing, I mean, the real question will be ultimately at the end of the day is, you know, can people find the strength to keep in their mind some sort of vision or dream for something better. Because I think the problem is that, and I think this is one of these things about Holy Week that maybe, again, going back to your question, is like, where do we find the faith to not just survive, but to actually create something even better? Right. And I think, for
and be better personally, right? Like that starts with us too, right? Like
right.
that's a part of that.
And I think that's part of the thing about Holy Week, right? I mean, like, look, I mean, Holy Thursday comes on, it's coming, it's the worst time, in many ways, the darkest time, for these apostles of Jesus to look at his face. And, you have one directly betray him, and then you have the others flee in fear. Right. And so in some ways, it's like, this is a very dark time, and yet they come out, or at least there's a feeling that by the end of this, or through Easter and through the days that come after Easter, they regain their faith. Right. And not only do they regain their faith, but they get an energy to recreate the world in a better, to recreate the better world that they want. Right. And in this case, it's through the, it's through the teachings of a better world through Jesus Christ. But in many ways, it's a general belief in terms of, for us to say, it's not just the faith to hold on, but to actually have the audacity to enact and believe that another world is possible. Right. Another world where people do have health care, where people do have the security of not just, not just security of law enforcement, but security in terms of housing and quality education and being able to see their grandkids grow up. Right. I mean, like that's the world we want.
A human being, man. Treat everybody like a human being. And I go back to that because and I said this on my last Soundoff, this concept of, and I'm not saying people weren't sympathetic to Puerto Rico, but, it's kind of like a we told you so thing. I mean, this is the playbook. So people basically thought, okay, this is how he's going to treat people of color. Right. And now he's treating everybody this way. And it's the same, the same thing. And it's, and I'm going to keep talking about these kids on the border, because if we don't care and do everything we can to get them back with their parents, then what are we talking about here? Then what are we talking about? Not only as activists or as Americans, this is people, as Christians or whatever. What are we talking about? So, yeah, I think but it starts with us, right? It starts with us. Real quick, LB, want to give a shout out to a great supporter of ours, great friend, one of my OGs from San Antonio, Texas. Juan Gutierrez chimes in. We are the change. No. We are the change, and we have the power to get ourselves out of this.
No doubt.
You're right about that, Juan. Always very philosophical. Anything else on your mind, brother, before we wrap up this episode?
I just think, and you asked me before earlier what Nadia was talking about, and I think for her it's a question of of providing hope, right? And I think we have to provide our kids with hope, and we also have to, we have to allow them to see us to cry a bit, right? To feel about this, right? I mean, we are, whether we like it or not, at some point, whether it's this week or last week, we have found ourselves in some sort of sense of grief, some sort of level of grief, right? I think we have to acknowledge that. I think we have to understand that that for some, we're trying to keep grief at arm's distance, but just more and more, I mean, everyone's going to know somebody. If you don't know already, everyone's going to know somebody who's been, deathly affected by this, right? And so the real question is what do we, at some point, once we have, I don't want to say healed, but at least dealt with the immediate grief, the real question will be, what are we going to do about it, right? To go back to your point, right? And I think you have to start out small. You have to start out in the way that you have control over. But, and we can't, in some ways, November seems like such a long ways away. But we can't forget that, right? I don't want us to forget this feeling, both the feeling of, fear and despair that some people feel, but also the feeling of what happens when you find a community, right? Because like you said, I think a lot of people have been finding some real cool things, reconnecting with folks that they've never had a chance to, sometimes even reconnecting with their own kids because they didn't, now they actually have to work at home and stuff like that. Let's not forget that, right? Let's not forget the good that is coming out of this, right? It's not all good, but let's not forget that good, and let's build on that good and fight harder to maintain that goodness.
The silver linings. I mean, you gotta really wallow in them and this amount of time with my children. I mean, I'm blessed. I spend a good amount of time with them anyway. But I mean, you're basically their teacher, and you're working, and there's all these interesting challenges. And I'm very privileged to be in that situation. So I'll take it any time. And then look, man, keeping it real, like, I mean, a lot of the guilt that I got a lot of anxiety on many levels with this, but that especially a social person like to hang out with their friends and hang out with people. But that thinking about, I still got my parents, and it's like, damn, I mean, I'll see them again, but it's gonna be a minute. And just this idea, like this guilt around men, I haven't spent enough time with them, and there's a lot of emotions like that. I haven't spent enough time with you guys and all of our fam, you know what I mean?
And it could all be gone, and it could all, and I guess, Ray, what I'm saying is that, like, we also are in privileged positions because, look, it's almost 11 o'clock at night. We're able to have this conversation. We're able to have internet. No doubt. Who knows? In 3 or 4 months, there might be a hurricane in Miami, and our power is gone for like for 3 or 4 weeks. Who knows?
Oh, yeah, this is first world struggling, no doubt about that.
But what I want to also caution people who are having this privilege, right, who are privileged to find the silver linings, is to remember that and to say everyone deserves that, right? Everyone deserves that chance to like work some amount of hours a day and spend some damn time with their kids, right? Everyone deserves, like an opportunity to spend some time with like people, catch up on someone who they've never met before, or meet somebody new, right? Like everybody fucking deserves that. Right? Like it shouldn't be like because like you have a certain job, or you have like, or you have a certain, or you don't have kids, or you do have, like everyone should have that.
That's right.
Right. And so it's like, if we're privileged to have that, we also have to remember that we should also be able to extend that privilege to other people. There's nothing wrong with that. Right. In fact, what's wrong is that not enough people get to experience that.
And
right?
You know what? Including many of the people that because of that desire to find something, or that they're missing something, who currently now are in this fog and following this false god. They deserve it too. And we need to fight for them to have it too. Because that's part of the reason this is all happening as well. Yeah. So, people cope in different ways. And that's part of the dynamic. Elbert, I appreciate you, man. Thank you for jumping on. I like going on. And you know how much I love you guys and care about you.
No doubt.
Care about all. I mean, we know I mentioned Sid's dad because he's a public figure. I mean, Sid's essentially a celebrity in our community. So, and Dr. Wilson,
I know that's a sad.
It's been largely reported. I know it's already being reported a lot in Dominican Republic and throughout the New York Latino circles. So I wanted to especially shout out that man. What a pioneer. And Sid I just saw him in Chicago. I mean, he was very complimentary of me and you and all of our friends and family.
I know.
And, but we know there's a lot of people that are struggling with this on a lot of levels. I saw that George Urban Hibaro Torres mentioned he got 50 people that got someone either that has passed or is in the hospital in New York. 50.
No, it's true.
And you and I probably got a dozen.
Yeah. No, there's definitely people. I mean, like, shout out to our friend Denny Taveras who lost an uncle. We got folks and definitely people who are doing that. And the strange thing is, especially if again, like I've got family in the New York, New Jersey area, and people are just like, and people also are afraid, right? Because they don't know, like, because again, at the end of the day, this is also the first wave, right? Like we're not done yet. I mean, yes, things might, the curve might go up high and reach its climax, but there's still a curve coming down, right?
And there's a big mountain going down, and there'll be peaks and valleys, and
and the mountain coming down will certainly, if we haven't seen it already, with the disproportionality in health, in health disparities, we will also get hit on way then coming down. And the problem is that even on the way down, you got people who are ready to jumpstart the economy, and that's when you have to have even more pressure, because there will be the temptation for either media and people to just try to be like, let's turn the page, and then turning the page, forgetting that they're folks, right? And so we, it's trying to figure out a way in which for us to rebound, but also to not forget folks as we're trying to rebound.
If you add up all the wars at this point, the recent wars, and there will be a desensitization. So if it gets up to 165, then if we're able to, on some level, people will buy into this. We can open it up. We lose another 10 extra, 5 extra, so be it. So that's we won't lose anybody. We're going to fight for everybody. So, my man Elbert, thank you, brother. God bless you. Stay safe, family.
Man. You too. And, stay safe. And
we appreciate the people watching and listening to the Found Translation Soundoff edition. We just had to say what we had to say. We got to keep, like my man Frank Bo said, keep 100. And I want people to think in Holy Week, because it is hard to equate some of this nonsense to our faith. But go back, because we got to just open our heart. We listen. The lessons are there and the parallels are there. And I wanted to bring that to the conversation, because this ain't just about political ideology. This is real. And we have our opinions and our thoughts because of real life experiences and real beliefs, because of how we care about people. And if the debate's just about how to best care for people, we're in a good place. We could disagree on things. Ain't no problem. Appreciate you, brother.
Take care, man.
Get back on the show soon. Thursday's going to be a good show. I just A-list guest that I'm trying to get for Thursday, who you know very well. I want to get in the names. She just said, I didn't get the email. I'm like, what's going on? I got to send her an email. One had to be a digit off or something, but we're going to have a great show on Thursday, and we'll keep the conversation going. Thank you, brother. Stay safe, my man.
You too. Stay safe.